And they got everybody's attention. Thank you all. Welcome to tonight's edition of the Active Transportation Committee, October 16th. By my watch, I see it's 6:30. I'd like to call us to order. Firstly, we acknowledge with respect that we are meeting on the traditional territory of the Lekwungen speaking peoples and are honored to have the opportunity to build strong working relationships with the people of the Songhees and Esquimalt First Nations. Approval of the agenda. Looking for somebody. Thank you, Colin. And oh, sorry, I do want to reorder it slightly, Colin, but I'll come back to you in just a second here. We do have some guests for item 5.4 in the gallery, so I think I'd like to reorder and move 5.4 up to 5.1 as a courtesy to our guests. So with that amendment, are you good, Colin? Thanks. Anyone opposed? Thank you. So we have here the agenda, adoption of minutes, Active Transportation Committee, June 19th. Mover, please. Thank you. And anyone opposed? Thank you. You got that, Amanda? Sorry. Thank you. Public participation. Anyone would like to step forward to speak with regard to something or present something to the committee? If you're scheduled, just hold your thoughts. If there's anyone else, is there anyone online, Amanda? Okay, relating to one of the agenda items. Thank you. Seeing nobody, thank you. A new business. So we will go to the new 5.1, which is Nafiseh. If you'd like to come forward. Yes. Yes.
All right.
Welcome.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. I'm Nafiseh Rashidianfar, Parks Planner of the City of Colwood. We are gonna give an update on proposed National Urban Parks active transportation feasibility studies. So I want to start with introducing the representative of Parks Canada, Alana Green, and Kirby Delaney from Fort Rudd Hill, and Andy Kading from Watt Consulting Group that we are going to co-present together. So I will hand it over to Alana to start with the Parks Canada National Urban Parks Initiative.
Thank you so much and welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. So I am Alana Green. I am the project lead for the proposed National Urban Park with Parks Canada. Joining with me today is Kirby Delaney, who is the establishment coordinator who works with the Fort Rudd Hill and National Historic Site, as well as Julia Cutt, who is a project manager with the Parks Canada as we work on capital investment projects toward the proposed National Urban Park. So the National Urban Parks is a relatively new idea with Parks Canada. We are proposing to put forward 6 national urban parks across Canada, including here in the Greater Victoria area, the Edmonton region, the Saskatoon region, Winnipeg, Windsor, and Halifax. And we have people working on these across Canada. And the idea with national urban parks they have such potential to conserve and restore nature in cities, help to mitigate the impacts of climate change, improve access to nature, protect and promote local heritage, and advance reconciliation with Indigenous peoples. And the 3 primary elements that we're using in formation of policy and in all our work related to national urban parks is the 3 connected elements of conserving nature, connecting people with nature, and advancing reconciliation with Indigenous peoples. And I also wanted to acknowledge that in our work with the City of Colwood, we've always enjoyed very mutual interests, and it's been a pleasure working with Ian and Nafiseh, and I look forward to continuing our project with them. Thank you. I'll pass things back to Nafiseh.
Thanks, Alana. Likewise. So City of Colwood has been recognized as one of the key partners for the proposed national urban parks in the Victoria region. So the site is expected to have the park gateway be centered around the lands within and around the Fort Rudd Hill. Fort Rudd Hill and Fisgard Lighthouse National Historic Site, in alignment with the three core elements that Alana just mentioned. Three key projects has been identified: ecosystem regeneration strategy, active transportation and public transit improvement feasibility studies, and develop and implement engagement process strategy. And we are here today to give an update on the active transportation project. So as I mentioned, one of the core element was connecting people to the nature. So we are trying to find out if we have the capacity for that. And in January 2023, Watt Consulting Group was retained by the city to help the city and Parks Canada to provide them with design option considerations and help us to run the feasibility studies for the proposed national urban parks. This study is intended to evaluate the accessibility for Colwood community for the future national urban parks, provide an opportunity for the residents and visitors to explore the area, learn about local and the nature and the culture, and provide the easy access for all ages and abilities. So I will ask Andy to come over, and he's going to explain a little bit more about the project.
Thanks. Hi, my name is Andy Kading. I'm with the consulting group. So the National Urban Park doesn't just live in isolation. It's connected to the broader community. And the image that we can see on the screen demonstrates the broader connections to the community. At the north, we have where the Galloping Goose and Ocean Boulevard and Belmont Road meet into the Triangle Lanes. The City of Colwood has an entire plan based on rejuvenating and enhancing the Triangle Lanes. This project obviously ties into that quite nicely, especially with the recently approved Galloping Goose overpass. So facilitating that connection is key. We also, the Ocean Boulevard connects into or passes immediately adjacent to the Fort Rudd Hill Park, which is the focus of the National Urban Park. So part of the National Urban Park strategy is to provide connections, and specifically active transportation connections, bus, bike, walk. The other interesting piece is the Ocean Boulevard as it crosses the lagoon and its connection into the broader development, the Beachlands development and all the other development that's happening there, plus the big changes that are happening along the waterfront. So the Ocean Boulevard's prominence in the area and its ability to connect the Triangle Lands, the developments of the South, and the National Urban Park is really, I guess, interesting or unique, for lack of a better term. Just slight changes to the boulevard could create those active transportation connections, and that's what our firm was hired to do. Just change. Okay. So what does that look like, this connection? Well, what we're broadly talking about is a multi-use path that would be along one side of Ocean Boulevard. Our analysis, because of the topography of Ocean Boulevard, it wants to be on the west side. There'll be significant savings in construction costs because of it slopes away on the east side, whereas the west side, you only have to cut. That's good. So when you're visioning this is a multi-use path. It's maybe 4, maybe 5 meters wide. Final determination is based on further examination. It's on the west side. It starts at where Ocean Boulevard and Belmont Road merge. And what we're proposing there is to change that triangle intersection now into a roundabout. And there's a couple variations on it. You could do a really low cost version. You could do a higher cost version. It would all still work. The intersection's sort of large, pretty awkward. straightening it out with a roundabout is actually a really easy and elegant solution. Right at that spot too, just to the west of Belmont Notion is where the Galloping Goose comes in. It's not shown on this map, but there's an informal connection that exists there today. By changing that intersection, you can tie that connection into what will become the multi-use path on the park. So now you've connected the Galloping Goose directly into this future multi-use path. The multi-use path runs down the west side. Again, it's 4 to 5 meters wide. In the version that we looked at, we had a 2-meter wide stormwater planted buffer that would replace the existing ditch. So stormwater would run into there. It would help treat it as it moves down the roadway, deal with the runoff. We're also proposing lighted bollards, pedestrian height, lower wattage, sensitive nature area, appropriate path lighting that would create a very nice ambiance and, allow people to use it in darkened hours. So we travel down Ocean Boulevard, heading south until we get to the Fort Rod Hill park entrance. It passes immediately adjacent to the park entrance. It's a simple crossing to get over to it. What that final version looks like, what that entrance looks like, is under development. Maybe the parking lot of the fort changes. Maybe it becomes a one-way in and then an exit down south where there's an existing gate, and then that additional lane gets changed over. Maybe it's something else, but what's nice is there's a lot of options. And so there's not, the final form can wait to be determined and you'll still have excellent access. Not shown on this map, but in that same area is the connections into the Department of Defense housing in the Belmont Road area. It's the big open area on the map to the west. There is a informal tie-in that'll bring you into there that nothing has to happen to. It's already in decent shape today, maybe a little gravel. It also ties into the Cavendish lands, which is kind of an interesting open area that's in there. It's used as part of the informal trail network to get to Royal Roads. So that ties, the park also ties into there and gives people in the Belmont, in that Department of Defense land, the ability to walk right to Fort Rod Hill or access the trail itself. So from the Fort Rod Hill entrance, we continue south and we get to the Lagoon Bridge. Again, final form of the bridge, there's a number of options that are very interesting. And so perhaps the bridge in one form just has some markings on it, the sharrows, if you know what those are, that they denote that this is a shared space for bicycles and cars. Maybe it has another form. It depends a lot. The bridge is older. There's an assessment that's taking place as part of this. But regardless of the final form, gets you over the bridge and then connects into the multi-use path that will be constructed as part of the rest of the lagoon works. So this one multi-use path can create a really impressive, effectively traffic-free connection all the way from the Beachlands development up all the way to the Triangle Lands and all the commerce that supports it, into the Galloping Goose and into the broader regional network.
Thank you.
Thanks, Andy. So where we are at right now, we just had a lot of discussion with Parks Canada and Watt Group, and Watt has drafted the very early draft. We have the conceptual design that is under review. The city plans to finalize the draft, the conceptual design, and the cost. We will have the Class D cost estimate. Once all these three are completed, they will be provided to the city for approval prior being submitted to Parks Canada. And ultimately, it will be one of the shelf-ready projects for grant application. That's all for tonight, and thanks for.
Thank you so much, Nafiseh. So I will bring that back to committee. There is no resolution that's needed for tonight. So this is an item for your awareness. I welcome any comments or questions.
I do have 3 questions on that. The first one is on the left side of that road towards the Fort Rod Hill Park, going along there. And on occasion, there is Garryoke ecosystems, like fragments of that. I was wondering if those are far enough away from the left side to not have to be interrupted with a 4 to 5 meter path. The second question is regarding to the roundabout. Would there be consideration towards the Dutch roundabout version for optimum safety for those? Because if you're going to have a huge multi-use trail there, you're going to want optimum safety so all ages and abilities can actually use that. And typical North American roundabouts fail miserably at that. So hopefully that's a consideration in those designs. And the third last question is for the Belmont Road there. I was wondering why it was at a consideration to put the path perhaps there instead of on the road, reducing the distance people have to travel between destinations. Thank you.
Thanks for those great questions. I can partially answer to those, and whatever I'm missing, Andy can help me with that. So for the ecosystem, we definitely considered, we are trying to minimize the impact that we will have on the ecosystem that we have on the side, because one of the main objectives of this project is nature conservation. So if we do that, we're actually going against that. Further to this project, we definitely work with landscape architect team that we make sure that we have enough consideration of that. Regarding the Dutch roundabout, I believe that we discussed, I think it was,
Happy to field that one. It won't be like a Dutch roundabout in the idea that there's like a circle for cars and a circle for bikes and pedestrians, because the way the roadway is laid out is not necessary. The Ocean Boulevard, Belmont that comes in has no cycling facilities on it currently. Doesn't need them. Galvin Goose is immediately adjacent to it. So it doesn't, there's no need for it. So what would happen is you would have the roundabout, it would split, you'd have the roundabout part, and then the Goose comes just on the side. So there would be as we proposed it, a beacon crossing that you would hit, you cross on a nice crosswalk, maybe raised. And then you go over and you come around a little nose. You're not getting anywhere near the roundabout at all. So you're completely separated from traffic the entire time. There's no full circulation because again, going north, there's no cycling, there's nowhere to go to. So no need for it, but the basic premise, fully separated, protected movements for bikes and pedestrians, yes. And what was your third question?
Sorry. Go ahead.
The third question was on Belmont Road. Was that a consideration for putting the trail there to shorten the distance?
Yes, we did have some discussion around that, but we try to keep any plan that we have on the cities right away. Yeah. And we have that as one of the future options that we consider, but there will be more conversation and more collaboration with the stakeholders, especially that area. A part of that is not the cities right away, so we can't really actually plan on that. Hopefully that answered your question.
Very good.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, perfect. Are you fellas good? Okay, hang on a sec, David, go ahead.
My only comment, just getting onto the roundabout, was that like groups of kids come down from John Stubbs and they access the West Shore Parks and Rec. So I just wanted to put that in there, that they'll be coming down Belmont Road. There's a comment that it's the Goose is right there, but myself and my kids, we both use Belmont Road onto Ocean Boulevard to access West Shore Parks and Rec. So while the multi-use path is great for going down to the beach, just that's a pretty high traffic area for pedestrians as well, heading the other way. So, yeah, that's all I wanted to comment.
Yes, and I think that's the main reason we discussed the roundabout around that area, because it's a lot more potential to dedicate that space to both pedestrian, cyclists, and for vehicles. So I think we had that discussion that we have the proper connection all the way from Lagoon Road Ocean Boulevard to Colwood Corner. So we do have that in consideration.
Thanks, Nafiseh. A couple of small things, and I think you might have touched on it a little bit. Do we have the road cross section on Lagoon Road all the way through without having to acquire any bits and pieces?
Sorry, I'm just a bit confused. Which part of
The
the,
road cross section on Lagoon Road, is it sufficient to support the multi-use path adjacent to it, or are we going to have to acquire some pieces from the federal government here at all?
no, we actually try to keep the multi-use pathway and the road in the city's right of way. So that's one of the main reasons we keep it on the west side of the road, because on the east side, I remember in one of the sessions that we had the conversation, it actually touched on the some of the other adjacent land.
Perfect, thank you. And I don't see anything in here about width. I think Colin mentioned 4 meters or 5 meters. Is it in here? I just can't see it. 5 meters, so 4 to 5 meters seems like a really large cross section. I mean, that's great, but we have the room for that width.
Yes, we do have that room. We already, as I mentioned, we have that under review at this point, but probably Andy can comment on that. But I believe that based on
yes,
active transportation network plan, I think the standard is 5 meter. And we have some other consideration to separate it from the vehicles and the multi-use pathway.
5 meters seems big.
Yeah.
But if you put bikes in one side and then pedestrians walking side by side on the other, it can get somewhat constrained. So, that being said, you could probably get by with 4, final to be determined. As far as you have the space for it, you have the right of way. As far as we know, no official survey has been done, but it looks like you have the right of way. There's not a ton. There's some rocky outcroppings that will have to be blasted through and some little fill, little cut here and there, but it looks like surprisingly feasible.
that's great. Thank you. I think you answered some of the funding. We'll be seeking some grant opportunities for funding. Is the Parks Canada a partner in this project then, or is this entirely our project?
This part is our project, but we are working through our collaboration together because we don't have any scope at this point for the proposed future national urban parks. That's why we try to keep the project on the city's right of way. But in the meantime, we had great conversation with Parks Canada so far to make sure that Andy touched on that the design that they will have through Forward Hillside, it will align with what we have. So it's basically coming together at the very end together. But at this point, we just try to keep it on the city's right away.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. And no motion is required. So we'll go to the 5.2, which is John Hicks, CRD Transportation Manager. Welcome.
Thanks so much.
And just hit your button on the microphone there. Needs to be read.
There you go. Excellent. My name is John Hicks. I'm the Senior Transportation Planner at the Capital Regional District. I'll be providing a bit of an update on the Origin and Destination Household Survey, which is undertaken every 5 to 6 years across the Capital Regional District. The results I'm sharing tonight are based on a regional, sub-regional, and local scale. Oops. There we go. The Origin Destination Household Travel Survey provides a pattern or a profile of travel patterns in the region. It gives a snapshot of travel across the region on an average fall day. The data guides additional research, supports transportation and land use planning decisions, and reports on targets and key indicators. The area that we actually survey is the regional planning area, which is basically the 13 municipalities within the CRD and the Wandafuku electoral area. We also have the we also include Salt Spring Island, which actually falls outside of the RPA. In this year's survey, last year's survey, we actually added additional questions based on feedback from partners. We added questions around e-bikes and e-micromobility. We added some questions around commuting, telecommuting to get a better indication of post-pandemic findings. And we added some information and questions on type of dwelling types so that we get an indication of as the land use changes in an area, what potential impacts there may be seen in terms of travel patterns. We also added a number of supplemental questions. These questions were largely aimed in terms of equity. These questions didn't go out to everybody. These were done in a supplemental survey. I believe we got to about 65% of the actual respondents, and they were focused on housing tenure, access to electric charging stations, and household incomes. We wanted that data so that we can do some cross tabulations, as we're aware that equity is obviously becoming an increasingly important way of reporting back and providing and informing decisions. I'm now going to walk through some of the key findings. Firstly, I'm going to start at the regional level, and then I'll move on to some of the more local level in terms of how it impacted Colwood. This table shows the transportation choices made by the regional planning area residents. So just as a reminder, that's everywhere in the CRD outside of the Gulf Islands. The trend identifies an overall increase in non-motorized mode shares since 2001. And transit is the one thing which stands out as being perhaps the most variable. It's gone up and down, but it hasn't changed dramatically over this entire time frame. Now we'll look at the absolute number of daily trips taken in the RPA. It shows a notable decline in both absolute trip numbers, which are down approximately 10%, and daily trips per person, which are down about 17% between 2017 and 2022. This aligns with what we've seen in other jurisdictions across Canada. At this point, it's unclear whether this is a new trend line or it's still related to the lingering impacts of the pandemic. This is one area that we'll be monitoring closely, but as it seems at the moment, it is coming across very consistently that there has been a change. Interpreting the mode share at a district level, this is where it gets kind of interesting. Each of the surveys, we have a regional survey which covers every resident in the RPA in Salt Spring. From that, we break it down into 13 municipalities. We call those districts, and that's where we get some of the detailed information. For each of the municipalities, we have a 2-page summary within the report. That gives you, the first page gives you summary on what your residents or how your residents of Colwood are traveling. The other one gives you the second page gives you information on how residents across the entire RPA are traveling to, from, and within Colwood. So it gives you 2 pictures of what your residents are doing and then what people visiting and working or recreating in Colwood are doing. And the pictures are quite distinct. I'm going to go through and give a bit of a talk about some sub-regional flows and internal trips. If you look at the map, it shows 2 distinct dynamics across our region. It actually shows that the declining flows in the core and peninsula. So if you look at the numbers, you'll see that the actual volumes and trips going up and down those areas are actually less than what they were previously. And then there's the opposing increasing flows between the West Shore and core, internal to the West Shore and through the Malahat. So it shows that the trip growth is actually largely, for our region, it's largely happening in the West Shore amongst our residents. The regional mode share targets. So we have regional mode share targets, which are approximately 15, 15, and 15, 15% for transit, 15% for cycling, and 15% for walking, just as the majority of our municipal partners now have. At the moment, as per the last survey, 2022 survey, we've reached the 15% walking target. Transit is sitting at 6%, and bicycles and e-mobility are 8%. That shows a 29% uptake on our 2038 target of 45%. The next slide shows that the trend for walking and cycling continues to trend up over time, whereas transit is more sticky with more inter-survey variation. So we'd like to break that down to this level of data so you can see where the changes are actually impacting different areas. We can cross-tabulate this with anything. So you can cross-tabulate this with where people are coming from, their age, their work, where they work, what type of jobs they have, etc. So we can do a lot of cross-tabs to get this information out. This is our sub-regional mode share and inter-regional flows. These graphs give you a bit of an idea of a more detailed nuance to how people are traveling. The inner circle of these diagrams represent trips made internally to the sub-region or intra-regional trips. In other words, these are the trips, the internal circle are the trips which happen within the West Shore sub-region. So we have the 4 sub-regions, the West Shore, the core, Saanich Peninsula, and then Salt Spring Island acts as its own. So this focuses on the West Shore. The West Shore includes Metchosin, Highlands, Colwood, Sook, Wandafuka, and of course, Langford. The outer circle represents trips made interregionally, so between the sub-regions. The data clearly shows that people are more likely to walk when traveling within their own sub-region. In the West Shore, transit use is perhaps the most notable distinction, with just 1% of trips internal to the sub-region, yet 6% interregional. This slide shows that the regional trend for trips by hour remains largely as it was, albeit with lower absolute trip numbers between 2017 and 2022. One of the key reasons we monitored this so closely is this is a CRD board goal. The goal is to mitigate travel in peak periods, so there's less demand on our infrastructure. Ideally, the scenario would show flattening during peak period trip demand. It hasn't quite shown that yet, but we're working towards it. The regional trip by purpose. This table identifies the reason people are taking trips. Traveling to work continues to remain the largest trip generator, followed by shopping and household maintenance. Recreational trips and trips to school showed absolute increases, breaking the overall decline in other trip purposes. Work trips saw the largest overall decrease in trips, keeping with stats showing the increased uptake of work from home. And to that point, we did do some additional survey in terms of work from home, and I'll share some of that information a bit later as we get to the more Colwood specific detail. The vehicle fuel types, this is once again, a lot of our municipal partners are targeting this as one of their goals and objectives. There's been a threefold increase across the region between the 2 surveys for alternative fuel source vehicles. EVs have gone from 0% in 2011 to 4% in 2022. The Colwood numbers are slightly different than that. Colwood actually has a higher level of hybrid vehicles and a lower level of electric vehicles at this stage. We'll now take a step away from the broader regional and sub-regional data to focus on the micro level data, specifically related to Colwood. These examples will give you an indication of the level of data that is available at the municipal level. The daily mode share for residents of Colwood, just a refresher that we have it 2 parts. We have the residents of Colwood and how they travel anywhere across the region. And this is what this is referencing. Absolute trips of Colwood residents declined in keeping with regional trends. The most marked change between the 2 surveys periods is a doubling of cycling from 3 to 6%. Colwood residents also bucked the trend of declining use of transit by increasing transit trips from 3 to 4%. You were definitely an anomaly on that one. Total mode share of active transportation plus transit was 16% versus in 2017 versus 18% in 2022. So showing that Colwood is actually heading in the direction that we would all hope for. The next slide, we will look at household by vehicle availability. Once again, this is focused on residents of Colwood. The majority of households in Colwood have access to 2 or more vehicles. This is quite distinct. Regionally, that is 44%, and in the core, that is 36%. The reality is the more vehicles in a household, it's more likely the larger number of trips to be taken in a household. The next piece of information relates to origins and destinations. And this relates to the regional planning area residents. So this is everyone across the region and how they travel through Colwood or to Colwood. So basically the slide identifies the origins of trips to Colwood and the destination of trips from Colwood. So the origin of trips to Colwood are basically largely internal. So the majority of trips within Colwood are being taken by Colwood residents or people who are already in Colwood going for a secondary or third trip once they're here. Then Langford, Sook, Machosen, and Stanage West. So that gives you a pretty good indication that a lot of the destination, a lot of the attraction is actually coming from the West Shore itself. Destinations where the trips from Colwood are going, once again, largely internal, then to a noticeably lesser degree to Langford, then Stanage East, Esquimalt, and View Royal. We could drill down into that data at some point in time. It's likely that that's a lot to do with workforce when we see where those destinations are. This slide shows how RPA residents travel to, from, and within Colwood. So once again, this is a bit distinct. The data shows that walking is high at 21% internal to Colwood. In other words, once people are in Colwood, there's a lot of their secondary or third trips that may be done by walking, while cycling trips account for 8% of trips and transit at 2%. That provides a total of 31% of trips made by AT and transit within Colwood. Walking accounts for 2% and cycling 3% to and from Colwood. So you can see that the data starts to change quite dramatically when you look at the travel out of district or out of Colwood. People become much more reliant on transit as opposed to walking and cycling, which given the distance in subregions would be expected. And basically I've just listed some areas that you may potentially want to watch over time and that we at the CRD are most definitely watching. Telecommuting is one of the key areas that we're paying extra attention to. 9% of working Colwood residents work 9% of working Colwood residents work exclusively from home. 79% of working residents have a usual workplace outside of the home. Of these, 25% of residents with a usual workplace telecommute at least 1 day per week or do some form of hybrid work. So that gives you an indication that there are some trip savings to be done through that type of work. Bicycle ownership, including e-bikes. We'll be monitoring this much more closely, particularly at the uptake of e-bikes. E-bikes gives residents and visitors a much longer distance in which they can comfortably travel. And we're seeing that growing exponentially compared to regular cycle purchasing. Car share memberships. I know there's an area in Colwood which hasn't moved forward as quickly as some other areas. And it's definitely an area that we're looking at, particularly as people move into smaller dwellings and with less space for garaging and parking. Electric vehicles and access to charging along the same lines. Obviously, people will only be comfortable changing vehicle types if they have access to charging. Total trips and daily trips per person. This is what we'll be monitoring very carefully. We want to make sure that the pandemic is seen for what it is, if there's any continuous trends from that, or whether they were just a lingering effect of the pandemic. And to be frank, we may not know that for a decade or so. We'd need probably 2 or 3 trend lines before we can start moving forward with that. So any assumptions based on that? And there was one more I just wanted to put in there as well. It's just household by vehicle availability. This flagged quite noticeably in terms of the number of vehicles per household in Colwood. But I think you may see that will change over time as your density increases and there's not that same capacity. So that is something we can definitely monitor closely. And so through the chair, I'll open up the floor to any questions you may have.
Thank you so much. There's a lot to digest there. I had a couple of things, but why don't we start with committee? Anyone want to chime in or ask a question? I'm betting the Lacey household has more than 1.4 bikes. That's true. Anybody else? Perfect. I think it's all very self-explanatory. And I think one thing I found interesting was the number of internal trips within our community. People starting in Colwood and finishing Colwood. Did it have a line on there about starting in Colwood and finishing in the West Shore in general?
Yes, we do have that information. As we can cross tab nearly any of the data, any of the questions we can cross tab to get more detail.
And, you know, I think it was surprising. I assume everybody that's getting in their car is heading into town, but clearly a large portion are ending their trip here in the West Shore, which, and it also, I find the single digit use of the transit not surprising with the concerns that we have as a community with our some of our poor transit services that, you know, so I think there's lots of room for improvement in that area. Thank you so much.
Thanks very much.
And again, there's nothing there. That's for your edification. I'd like to call up Karen Labree. Is she here? Or someone from the walkrollmap.org? Oh,
Yes,
she's
I'm
there.
here. I'm just having trouble getting my camera going.
We hear you just fine.
Okay. Do you have my slides? So maybe we'll just do that. I'm sorry, I'm calling in from the other side of the country, so maybe my traveling.
If you can give us just a moment, and
Sure.
then Amanda, can you bring that up for us?
Yeah.
Okay, you can see that?
I can see that. That's perfect. Thank
Great.
you.
Let us know when to advance it.
Sure, I will. Yeah, so sorry about that. I'm not sure what's happening. But yeah, I was invited to come and speak and to share with you a couple of community science platforms that have been developed over the years at UVic that can possibly support your planning for active transportation. And so both of these projects were funded by the Public Health Agency of Canada. The first one was bikemaps.org, and then the one that's currently underway and being funded is Walk Roll Map. Okay, so next slide, please. So the whole idea with using crowdsourcing, it's actually a form of volunteer geographic information. And so I used to work for a professor at the University of Victoria in the geography department, Dr. Trislan Nelson, and she was when she lived in Victoria, she was a huge cyclist. And so one day, and we used to study grizzly bears and all sorts of other things all over that you could map spatially. And one day on her ride into work, she had what many cyclists, refer to as a near miss. And so she said, I wonder if I can make a map of these. And at first it was just going to be sort of a fun, frivolous project. But then as she started talking to epidemiologists and people involved in active transportation and road safety, she found out that cycling safety data were quite limited, that, there were very few of the actual collisions that cyclists had made it to official data. And then, of course, near miss data never did either. So this is where the idea for bike maps came about. Next slide, please. So that was back in 2014. So we're almost coming up on 10 years now. So as you can see, we have people who have mapped all over the world. And of course, there's different parts of the world, mostly North America, but we also have a lot in Iceland. But you can see there's a lot of points in certain locations. And on bike maps, you can report 3 different types of reports. And you can report collisions, near misses, falls, and you can also report hazards. We do have a capacity to report bike thefts, but we haven't really done much with that, so I wouldn't really advertise that too much. So we've actually had the site around almost 10 years, as I mentioned. It's translated into French, Spanish, and Icelandic. And so we've had a lot of success and gained a lot of attention from this. It was, at the time, it was quite a novel thing. Next slide, please. So the whole reason that bike maps has sort of filled a gap is because a lot of bike collisions don't get reported. And this is something that doesn't just occur in BC or Canada or North America, but actually worldwide. So there's very few places I've ever seen a report that where it was estimated that more than a third actually get reported to official databases. So you can see there are numbers in Europe anywhere from 0 to 35, in Australia 9%. Some of our colleagues over at Simon Fraser actually did a study where they actually surveyed people to find out whether they reported them to police or ICBC, and they came up for Vancouver with 19.5 reported to police and only 12.2 reported to ICBC. And, you know, certainly some of the reports that we collect on bike maps will sort of once in a while give you a bit of an indication as to what happens and why people aren't reporting. Is, you know, this one here was talking about, you know, somebody who got hit by a person driving, and they kind of made a side deal, you know, so that the person's ICBC record wouldn't be tarnished or impacted. So there's a whole, obviously a whole bunch of reasons why they don't end up in a database, but it just means that having these crowdsourced reports can start to fill a bit more of a data gap. And, you know, combined with ICBC reports, you get a bit more of a sense of where the problem areas are. Next slide, please. So on bike maps, you can report falls, you can report collisions or near misses with motor vehicles. You can also report them with other bikes or pedestrians or animals. For a while, when we first started, we actually had several years, we had tons of people reporting deer collisions. And it was actually kind of interesting because the epidemiologist for BC didn't realize that this was such an issue, whereas, you know, the people working in the emergency departments, they knew anecdotally that there were a lot of people coming in from deer collisions, but really we were the only ones picking up on this very niche incident for the area. You can also report falls or collisions with posts, so some of the bollards, potholes, curbs. And you can also report hazards that you encounter as a cyclist on the road, so potholes or gravel, sand, and debris. Next slide, please. So a lot of these reports were based on our promotion efforts, which we have been undertaking since 2014. So, you know, we've spent many hours out in the community at Bike to Work Week, which is now called Go by Bike Week. We used to do pop-ups with the CRD and Sandwich Bike Patrol on the regional trails. You know, we've given talks like the one I'm giving tonight to, you know, community groups, you know, certainly social media. So we've tried to get the word out, and the reports kind of ebb and flow over time, but it's really about getting the word out to let people know that they can report on the site. And I think if you know, if a municipality, like certainly there's a lot of data already on the site for Colwood, but I think as soon as if you did want to, you know, really focus on gathering reports for Colwood, if you can let people know that you're paying attention and you're looking at the site, I think then you start to close the loop and people feel like, oh, somebody's paying attention to this, and they'll be more incentivized to actually report things that have happened to them while they're cycling. Next slide, please. So over the course of the almost 10 years that we were out there, well, I guess this takes us back a few years now, but so say over the, you know, the 5 years with bike maps, and we would often get asked to do something for the pedestrian environment. You know, they'd say, well, you know, I'd like to be able to report places where, you know, I was walking and had an incident, or, you know, places where the snow isn't cleared, that sort of thing. And so we decided to create another platform called walkrollmap.org. And the idea with that one was to really, you know, capture things that are particular to people who are in the pedestrian environment, and also understand like what makes people comfortable or uncomfortable when they're out walking. And so part of that is really making sure that we're including accessibility issues. And so really the role in Walk Roll Map, it refers to people using any kind of mobility devices. Next slide, please. So the goal of Walk Roll Map is to fill a data gap similar to the one that Bike Maps fills, but this time with the collection of microscale barriers to walking or rolling, and again, using crowdsourced mapping. And the purpose of this research project, which was also funded by the Public Health Agency of Canada, was to work with community partners to try to reach diverse people, of all ages and abilities. And so we knew it was going to be a bit of a challenge because unlike cyclists who, they really seem to group together, the people who could, report to Walk Roll Map were essentially everybody. But, they're a bit less defined and they don't really self-identify as much as cyclists do. Next slide, please. So as you can see, there is a fair bit of data on Walk Roll Map around Colwood and in the West Shore. And we have 3 different types of reports you can make on this one as well. So you can report a hazard or concern. We also have a type of report where you suggest a missing amenity. And then the last category is to report an incident. And this, so similar to Bike Maps, this would be a near miss, a collision, or a fall. Next slide, please. So for the hazards or concerns, we've kind of grouped them into 4 different categories. And this was just trying to make it as intuitive as possible when somebody went on the site. So there is a little bit of redundancies amongst the different categories, just in case what you thought was an issue didn't fall into the same category that we necessarily did. So we grouped them by sidewalk issues, crossing issues. So this could be, places where a crosswalk is needed or that there's a problem with the crossing. We have weather related or seasonal issues. So of course that could be ice or snow or maybe leaves on the sidewalk. And then finally, safety or comfort concerns. And those would include things, like personal safety. So maybe lighting isn't great in some places that people need to walk, or, those kinds of sort of more less traffic safety related and more personal safety related. Next slide, please. So the other category that we have, which is a bit of a different one from the Bike Maps, is the ability to suggest an amenity. And the reason we included this was because we recognize that there are a lot of extra things that make walking possible for some people. And this could be a bench that allows people to either connect with their neighbors or just gives them a place to rest. Next slide, please. Or it could be a washroom, a water fountain, wayfinding signs, shade in the summer. So when we were developing Walk Roll Map, we actually undertook a series of interviews with planners and council members and members of different organizations across Canada, just to try to see what sorts of things we should ask or have the ability to map on Walk Roll Map. And so this amenities list really is the product of those interviews. Next slide, please. And so finally, the last type of mapping or report you can make is to be able to map collisions, falls, or near misses. And falls are something that we really would like to get a handle on. It's really challenging to understand how many falls are actually made out on streets and in the public realm as a pedestrian. They just don't have that kind of nuanced data in the hospitals, and we just don't have a good idea how many, where people are falling and how much injury is actually the result of falls. So this is something as researchers we would really like to understand a bit better. And I think too, as municipalities, it's obviously nice to know places where these incidents have been happening. Next slide, please. So just to sum up, I mean, the benefits of Bike Maps and Walk Roll Map is that it's easy to use, It's immediate. So as soon as somebody reports something, it's up on the site, and, people can do this at any hour of the day. So they don't just have to wait for, for a public feedback session, they can just do it at any time. And it's a great way to keep ongoing track of hazards or issues for free for municipalities. You can keep track of any, any new active transportation projects that you've developed, because often, slight adjustments need to be made after you introduce something. It helps you identify local issues, as I mentioned, the deer before, and it's kind of an oddball thing for the region, but it just shows you it's really sensitive to these sorts of locally specific types of incidents. And then the data can be used to support active transportation, your planning, and just, as I mentioned, the surveillance. And then from our perspective, it provides data for research, on bicycling safety, public health, pedestrian safety. So the data on bike maps, we are happy to provide it to you. You just have to get in touch and let us know. And for Walk Roll Map, we've already got it set up that you can go to the visualization page and choose Colwood as a spatial subset, and you can it will allow you to focus in on just the Colwood data, and you can just download that anytime you'd like. Next slide, please. So this is our research team currently. So a lot of our research is, it started in Victoria, but a lot is taking place in California now. We have researchers at Simon Fraser, and we actually have quite a group in Quebec, and actually that's where I am right now. I've been at the Piéton Quebec summit here. That's a 2-day summit. It's the first pedestrian safety summit in Canada. So there's a lot of pedestrian safety going on in Quebec, and they've been really using the French version of our site. So it's been pretty exciting, and it's been fun to share it with everyone here. Thank you.
And thank you so much. That's great. So really, just for clarity's sake, what is it? First off, I like the fact that this is open and accessible to everybody. But what can we do to help from our end of the ledger here?
Well, if you're interested in having this data available, I mean, first of all, you're lucky that we've been promoting it for close to, the bike maps, especially for, close to 10 years. So there's already a lot of data there. But if you would like to see people continue to map in Colwood, then I think you just have to let them know that you're watching for it, and certainly we can, partner with Capital Bike and other advocacy organizations, to get the word out. But you can also just put a little note on your website that, if people have any issues, they can put them on Walk Roll Map. And then, you'll periodically look at them, or you'll pull the data down on a regular basis. And that way, people feel like the loop has been closed.
That's great. Thank you so much. And I do see, I made a note here that certainly we can add to some of the awareness for our residents and draw a link to your site here. I'll bring it back to committee. Any questions, any input? Hang on just a sec. Sorry.
Okay.
I was just going to add, thanks, Karen. I was just going to add that, maybe perhaps we could add a hyperlink from the report and issue page on our website. That might help.
So that's great. And I'll connect with Sandra, our communications manager, and she's always looking for material. So that's great. Thank you so much, Karen.
Oh, you're welcome.
Have a good night.
Yeah, thanks. It's late here.
All right. Moving right along. 5.4, Vaughn. Aaron. 5.4, sorry, the new 5.4 is we had these. Aaron Knutson. Sorry, I was too far ahead. Thank you, Aaron. Sorry, Vaughn. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm Aaron Knutson from Engineering Department here at the city. And I'm here tonight to present to you a new proposed project that's come to the Engineering Department for review, the Wale and Wilfert intersection improvements. We just received a preliminary design, which we've gone through. I just one series of reviews, and we feel like it's fitting well with our active transportation sort of goals and objectives. Staff is seeking committee's recommendation to council to look further into these types of treatments that I'll be going through tonight with you, and looking at applying them at other locations in Colwood where we have like a multi-use crossing, such as the Galloping Goose. So just a little background on the current existing construction of the intersection. It's what we call like an untraditional, unstandard T intersection. We have the two slip lanes that come off of Wale and onto Wilfert that do create some challenging crossings for pedestrians and cyclists. Also sort of lends towards higher speeds for some of the vehicles coming off of Wilfert or onto Wilfert. We also have some challenges with some of the queue lengths currently. They are around 2 to 3 car lengths. The the transportation assessment that we received for a project in this area spoke to lengthening these queue lengths quite drastically, especially when we're considering the future growth of that area with the gateway visioning. And you can also see from the image here that there's some disconnection with missing pieces of sidewalk, and obviously the multiple crossings that you have to go through if you're on the Galloping Goose trying to get, commute through that intersection. This slide here shows very high level preliminary design of the proposed works. First off, you can see right away, you can see the green crossing. It's a diagonal crossing that we're looking at to obviously provide a safer, more direct route through the intersection for cyclists, while also still keeping the traditional crosswalks for pedestrians if they choose to use that route. The intersection will become fully signalized, which is a huge bonus upgrade, since right now it's just a single stop on Wilfert. We'll also be adding a significant amount of protection to the bike lanes that are there now. It's a little bit more of an infill measure because the roadway is mostly established through previous developments. So we're looking at more of the concrete barrier with pickets to provide a little bit of protection and separation from the cars. We're also looking at creating better mixing zones for where the Galloping Goose meets the sidewalks, enlarge those areas, give them a bit different treatment. Yeah. So some of the goals and initiatives and objectives we think that are being met is, we're further supporting the multimodal transportation and investing in our active transportation. We're improving the cycling and pedestrian safety with adding the signals and the improved crossings. We're also protecting the cyclists with the added buffers and the diagonal crossing. we're also further developing the livable neighborhoods by providing safe access for children and families and encourage the active transportation again. A couple of the areas that we thought could be good for consideration for this same sort of design treatments are Souk and Aldine, where we have the Galloping Goose that crosses Souk Road. And the Royal Roads University main entrance is also located there. So quite high activity for students. And of course, we all know Souk Road's quite busy. And then the other location we thought about was VMP and Kelly Road. Very busy intersection with this crossing. Of course, it would be a combined effort with Colwood and Langford to work on that. So yeah, in conclusion, we feel that the proposed design, like I said, really is in line with our goals and objectives for encouraging this active transportation and shifting modes, providing better safety for everybody using that intersection. I'll repeat our ask is that staff is seeking the committee's recommendation to council that we look at using similar design treatments in other Galloping Goose crossing locations in Colwood. Thank you very much. I'll be here for questions, and John Rosenberg, our director, is also here to assist with any questions.
Thank you, Aaron. I'll bring that back to committee. Who wants to go first? Haven't heard from. Go. We're gonna start down there.
Thank you. Great presentation. Just a small question that you might be able to answer. The Souk and Aldine, I think it's out of scope for this project, but I want your confirmation. Across the road is in Royal Roads. I think it's their land proper. I don't know if it's the city of Colwood. And the bike lane there gets really, really close to an existing structure. Sight lines for oncoming people from the Galloping Goose are very low. So I'm just wondering if that is something that could be considered when that project is done, or whether it's, again, a little bit out of scope because it might be just on across another city boundary of some kind. Thank you.
Yeah, I would say that, I guess, as part of this presentation or this proposed works, it would be sort of out of the scope, yes. However, if we're asked to look at using these types of treatments in the areas such as Souk and Aldine, then that would definitely be a consideration of, the improved safety, connectivity. So yeah, it would be out of the scope of this project, but hopefully in the scope of a future project.
I have some issues with the one at Wale Road. What's it called? It's like not like a slip lane anymore, but like it's kind of like the turning right lane. It crosses over, like you got a conflict zone painted there. With this, I feel it fails Colwood's goals of all ages and ability, because those kind of spots have huge amount of accidents because they're just blind spots far left, right, and center. So I'm wondering why wasn't like a protected intersection design where the bike lane stays with the sidewalk until you go and cross the road together at the same time, rather than preferring these conflict zones.
Because there's no way I can get back to my presentation to point to a slide or. Yeah. So as I understand your question, you're speaking of the right turn lane that goes from Wale onto Wilfert.
Yes.
So yeah, we had definitely some challenges with this intersection due to the restraints that we're dealing with, because 3 of the 4 corners, almost 4 of the 4 corners actually have been developed. And we had to work with large turning radiuses for the vehicles that use Wilfert Road currently, in particular Columbia Fuels. So basically we're able to shrink the intersection to provide that protection that you're speaking to, and still provide the turning radiuses that we needed to. So that's why we looked at implementing the curb barriers, the green paint, which I understand it is just paint, but at least it gives a higher level of visual. Yeah, I mean, there was even challenges in getting the right turn lane there at all, because there's some grade challenges with the current building that's there now and the sidewalk that's adjacent to it in front of it.
Well, I'm not an engineer, but I have seen other places where when they do have these like really tight, difficult spots, because I understand that that is a really difficult tight corner, but plenty of places have just swapped the locations, like just like instead of the bike lane being right on the left side of that right turn lane, it's on the right side. And then with that, it's with the sidewalk and then can be protected. And other places haven't had much of an issue with that. So I was just kind of curious to see why those were on the left side instead of put with the sidewalk and just flipped.
Well, we could definitely look at that closer as we progress through this design and see if there's an option to flip that.
And one last thing I'm noticing on this, the previous design had a zebra crosswalk, which improves visibility and whatnot, but now there seems to be this preference for just 2 white lines, reducing visibility, making it seem more like a place for cars instead of people. What was the reasoning behind that choice?
Largely, it's sort of I guess you could call it an internal procedure that we use for where we use zebra versus parallel bars. So a fully signalized intersection, we tend to go towards the parallel bars instead of zebras. Not necessarily opposed to zebras, so that's definitely something we could reconsider as part of the design as well.
Okay, thank you. That's all from me for now.
Hi, Aaron.
Hello.
Firstly, I want to say thank you so much. It brings me a lot of joy to see this intersection and the other 2 under consideration for improvement. I've been using that one for about 18 years and the last 12 with my kids as well. So this is great to see. I have some anecdotal observations just because I've used it a lot. Today, I actually paused on my way home from work. So with the Wale Road in Wilfert, great to see the diagonal. I think Colin already mentioned it. So just talking about that area as a whole, in the last decade, we've seen, as you mentioned, lots of development. So where the big hole was is now a big condo building. Across the road, there's the Holiday Inn and the condo building above. There's the tap house and grill across the road. South side is the retirement village that was expanded. So lots of foot traffic. Further up Wale is, the West Shore family, child and family services. So lots happening. And then further down, of course, the Tim's and Wendy's and the co-op. So lots of foot traffic, lots happening, lots more density. So for a start, I'd like to see that area become a 30-kilometre-an-hour zone, proceeding on the west side where the child and family services is. Get people to slow down, mainly because the density has increased so much and there's going to be so much more foot traffic. Improve active transportation safety. So that's a start. Most injuries and deaths occur at intersections, as we know, for active travellers. I can't say I'm keen on the increased turning lane length. I've noticed that delivery trucks park in the centre of the road, in the median outside the Holiday Inn and the tavern and the grill. And they actually they walk across the road with their goods, supplying those businesses. So that's really unsafe. I'd love to see a loading zone, dedicated loading zone, instead of I think there's about 4 or 5 parking spots in front of the tap house. So rather than extending a turning lane, which tends to encourage faster speeds at the corner, I'd love to see a loading zone there so that workers that deliver to those businesses are safer. And then the sight line coming from Wilfert approaching Wale, it's really difficult for drivers to see past that building that's on the northeast corner, like the condo building. Quite often they'll slow and then they'll stop on the crossing that crosses Wilfert Road, just because they don't have a good sight line, going down, looking towards Hook Road, down Wale. So that's an issue, and that's going to continue to be an issue. I just wondered if it's possible to push the pedestrian crossing further to the north, allowing a 1-car space between the crosswalk and the stop line for the intersection. I just wondered if that would be a thought, just because that sight line is pretty bad. So the drivers tend to creep right up so they can actually see and make a safe turn. That was one thought. Just got a couple of notes here. Oh yeah, so I noticed there was a stamped concrete detail on the northeast corner. In my experience, it's a really bad surface treatment, especially with the retirement home and people with walkers and other mobility aids, as well as micro mobility, skateboards and scooters have a really hard time on stamped concrete, and walkers and wheelchairs. It just makes it uncomfortable and sometimes difficult to roll on stamped concrete. So that wouldn't be my first choice with regards to the stamped concrete. I think that's about everything, but thanks so much. Yeah, especially the diagonal, the goose right of way. I'd love to see that the trail users receive the same consideration as drivers do on Wilfert and Wale, so that they get a light sequence without either having to push the button, or that there is a camera or sensors that pick up active travelers on the goose for their turn to cross. Anyway, thanks very much, Aaron. Yeah.
Thank you. Can I actually respond to?
Yeah, there's a lot there.
Mr. Lacey? There's a couple little things. I'm hoping that the sight line that you spoke to would be greatly helped by having it signalized. So you're not competing, you're not trying to get out into there, trying to look past the buildings. You have your own.
Yeah, gotcha.
And then the other thing is the stamped concrete. I get what you're saying for sure. It's tricky because we want that surface obviously to be used by the larger wheelbase vehicles and not traditional cars. So that's why you have that different surface treatment.
Yeah, it gives them that tactile feedback, right, when they're using it.
Yeah, and it's going to have a mountable curb at this present time, which there will be a letdown for the crossing movement. So there won't be a mountable curb there, but the rest of the radius will be mountable. So
yeah, okay.
But we definitely need to look at the finer details of it. So we can keep that in mind. I'm not certain what other material we could use. But yeah, thank you.
Thanks. Thank you so much, David. Thank you, Aaron. I think you've ticked off most of my stuff here. I did the tanker trucks, not so much this intersection, but say, if it comes to fruition at a place like where the Goose connects across Kelly Road there, Kelly and BMP, I take it that would necessitate the kind of scramble signal operation where all directions are stopped and everybody cycles across the road.
Yeah, potentially. I mean, I actually should have mentioned that as part of my presentation, and you spoke to it a little bit with the bikes and having their own phasing or such. We are looking at having the addition of bike designated sensors, which is supported by CRD. We consulted with CRD about that type of technology. So whether it's, the hockey puck or the circle in the asphalt or other type of push button. But you're right, potentially a scramble at that very busy intersection might be what we're also going to look at specific signalization or timing of the intersection of Wale and Wilfert as well. It might be like a hybrid scramble to safely have bikes cross and pedestrians cross and then allow the vehicle.
Okay. Interesting. Yeah, I take it the T intersection, everybody's going to be stopped anyway, so not quite the same at those. And, this discussion is timely as committee and the community has heard that, we're headed for a new pedestrian bridge, cycling pedestrian bridge across a short distance away from here. So it behooves us to think about this area here. And I know Mr. Lacey raised some points about the general flow of traffic and pedestrians and what have you in that short stretch there. So one question, is this I'm getting the sense that this is through the redevelopment that's occurring in that area is the genesis for some of this. And so there's an opportunity for us to appropriately fund this and do the works.
Yeah, the design is through the development of 2676 Wilfert Road as part of their development agreement. So right now it's 100% funded by them. We are pursuing a grant at the moment for the active transportation guidelines grant. And we've just putting a package together for an application for that.
So that's good to know that there is funding available for this this intersection. And it seems to me I was around when we did the last set of works on this intersection. So
yeah,
it wasn't that long ago. Thank you so much. And Colin.
One thing was brought up again. I noticed, correct me if I'm wrong, but was there the yellow tactile pads at the crossings? Just in terms of another accessibility thing.
Yeah, we have been still talking about that, whether we require those or if we're going to go with more of the updated active transportation tool markings that are more like perpendicular to the crossing. Similar to, I guess, I think TAC has those standards right now. So we're debating whether we have the tactile mats or if we go with just the new treatments of having the scored markings for direction of travel.
Okay. So that's perfect. So this is very preliminary. So all this is the kind of feedback that our staff are looking for.
Yeah,
and, I mean, you heard the concerns of mobility, people with mobility challenges in the stamped concrete or the raised bits, but conceptually, I think it's great. We are looking for a motion. The motion, I believe, hang on a second, reads that the Active Transportation Committee considers recommending that staff explore the use of similar design treatments as proposed for Wale and Wilfert intersection at other Galloping Goose crossings. Would someone like to make that motion? Thank you, Mr. Lacey. No seconder required. Discussion. Yes. Are you in favor or you want to discuss? Okay, hang on just a second. Go ahead.
Discussion.
Thank you.
I'm wondering if we can make a motion to add something to the motion.
So, and if you would like to make an addition, so go ahead and offer your amendment.
So my amendment is to have the addition to the current form, but for the intersections, when we have these, or any intersection, I guess, in.
Slow down.
Sorry.
There's a term taken.
Sorry, over there. My addition would be for intersections that are getting updated, particularly ones that have these like diagonal crossings, that the intersections at all costs avoid having conflict zones in favor of protected intersections for further
Okay, so
accessibility.
procedurally, I tell you what, can you hold that thought and we'll come back to you and we'll deal with this motion because the two don't necessarily relate to each other. I mean, there is some congruity, but can I come back to that and we'll make a general motion for all intersections and your thoughts?
Yes, I suppose that would be better. I was just seeing that particular intersection that had that conflict zone. So
Okay.
I guess, yeah, that would also work better.
I think Mr. Knutson here has heard your concern about this particular intersection, and then I'll come back to you for a general motion for other
Yes.
intersections. Does that work?
Yes,
Thank you. So the motion as read, anyone opposed to that? Seeing none, thank you. That passes. And back to you, Colin, here, press your button. And if you want to frame that sort of in a more concise manner for Amanda, here's, go ahead and propose your motion.
My motion is the proposal for having all intersections, one being updated or renovated on just at least a piece of it, to have to favor protected intersection designs rather than having conflict zones. One typical design is like the Dutch standard intersection. I can send you some links if it does get approved for some design recommendations that they use.
And I think maybe, do you have all that first off?
So I believe what you were saying is that all intersections being updated would favor protected intersection designs.
Yes.
That's concise. Can I just offer just a slight caveat there, sort of where possible or wherever possible, something like that, as opposed to every single intersection, because geographically we may not have the cross section in some intersections.
Sure.
Okay. If that works for you. Did you get all that? Thank you.
All right, thank you.
I don't think we require seconder. That's a motion from Colin. And I think we can just, that doesn't require a seconder or anything. I don't think. Ian, yes, you're in the hot seat. Yeah, I don't think so. And discussion, any discussion on that? Go ahead.
Sorry, I actually just had another question for Aaron. Sorry, I know it's preliminary, but I just want to ask, the slip lanes at the Wale Wilfert, would they be because it's fully signalized, would the slip lanes be allowed to turn right on red, or would they also be facing the red light? Like, is there going to be no right turn on red? Because that's a huge one, especially for coming off of Wilfert, turning right onto Wale. That would be a big conflict. So that was just a question. Sorry.
Yeah, definitely part of the
Did you turn yourself off?
as part of the traffic impact assessment, it did identify that movement, and it was recommended to have red on the right, like the right turn. Yeah.
So sorry, it would be a right turn allowed on the red.
No, it would stop the right turn for the
right.
pedestrians, and yeah.
Right. Thank you.
And to be fair, these types of issues are reviewed each time we do undertake this kind of work at an intersection, whether it's going to pose a danger or not. So,
Great. Thank you.
thank you.
All right, you're welcome.
Thank you. Any questions about the motion? Any further input? Thank you. And anyone opposed? Seeing none, that motion passes. Amanda, do you have everything you need there? Thank you. Thank you, Aaron. And Vaughn, you're up. Welcome. Everything about traffic counters, eh?
Is this working? Okay. Yeah, my name is Vaughn Bakker. I work for the City of Colwood in engineering, and I'm here to present a briefing update on the active transportation counter implementation project. So back in 2022, Colwood staff, following the official community plan and strategic initiatives, we applied for a grant through MOTI called the BC Active Transportation Infrastructure Grant. And we were able to successfully get the grant, which was around $120,000, which 60% would be eligible to be taken care of by MOTI. So council agreed to move forward with this project, which would we would install pedestrian and cyclist counters in 7 locations in Colwood. So through that, we engineering would choose a supplier and installer for these counters. So 3 types of counters were chosen. There was the urban multi-post, and then the second counter was a Sidewalk AI camera. And then the third counter was, it's called the Eco Display Classic Plus. It's like a 6 to 8 foot tall like totem, which has like a display screen on it. You can display like the number of pedestrians that pass by it or the number of cyclists. So that one's like a more easier and like very highly visible display. I don't know if you guys have the actual report or briefing in front of you or not. But if you take a look on the second page, it shows all the locations of each of the counters on the map. The green showing the camera, the gray showing the posts, and then I'm partly colorblind, but I think it's purple showing the totems. So as you can see, the totems are installed or will be installed as part of the one will be as part of the Galloping Goose bridge project, and then the other one will be installed as part of the waterfront stewardship plan project. And then the rest are installed in locations in Colwood where we consider there to be higher pedestrian and cyclist movements. So we decided to go the supplier. We decided to go with Eco Counters as the supplier. Through our research and collaboration with other municipalities, a lot of them are using these products, and they are quite efficient. And so we decided to go with Eco Counter. So we did get those 3 types of devices for the locations based off of some locations. It would be tricky to install the posts, so we thought like the cameras would be a good spot for some of those locations. So currently, right now, we have received 5 of the 7 counters. We've hired a contractor to install them, and they are actually starting this week, which is very exciting. The other 2 totem style counters we have not ordered yet. We are getting a design for there's like these kind of like wraps or skins we can put over top of the totem posts, which can kind of show like a nice design for Colwood. So I'm just currently working with communications on the design. And once that's completed, I can send it over to Eco Counters, and then we can order the totems for the the two high visible locations. So yeah, it's going along well, and we can, through the installation of these counters, we can have a better understanding of where people are traveling, using cyclists or using bicycles or walking through Colwood, and kind of see where they're moving and where we could potentially improve amenities around those areas.
Thank you so much, Vaughn. And I note that you're not looking for any direction from us, so it's really just an update for committee. Does committee have any questions, any thoughts or ideas? Perfect. I did have one note to myself here. Will all this data be publicly posted to our webpage or through our active transportation, like what is it, sort of our blue toad data and all that? So, I mean, will people be able to go online and look at the results, I guess is the question.
Yeah, so we all the counts that we get from the counters, we're collaborating with CRD. They have they have a website that shows the number of counts, so we'll be able to display Colwood's counts on there. And then I think it could also be possible to show that on Colwood's webpage as well if needed. But for now, it definitely will be available on that website. So yeah.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Seeing nothing else, thank you, Vaughn.
Okay, thank you very much.
And Tyler. All things sidewalks.
Yes, all things sidewalks. Hello, everyone. My name is Tyler. I work in our engineering department as well. Seen a lot from engineering today. And I'm our engineering capital projects lead. Tonight, I'm here to speak to the active transportation sidewalk projects. Right. So to provide some background on 2021 spring, Urban Systems was engaged to do an analysis of our 2006 active transportation plan, official community plan, and transportation master plan. And as part of this summary report, identified priority sidewalk projects and bike lane projects. This was taken to council where a decision was made on the active transportation projects to prioritize in the near term. 2 of these projects are now complete, which is the Ben Homer and Owens project, and 4 remain which are now in the design stage. So in the spring of this year, we took the preliminary designs to council, where we provided some design considerations. At this meeting, we presented this and took this feedback from council and implemented this into our now received 90% design submission. So tonight, as part of the report for this, we've attached these 90% design drawings, and it's a great opportunity for the committee to provide some comments on the designs. I will speak to some of the design considerations that are relevant to the new designs as well. I'm actually going to go to the next slide. So here's an example where you have a rock face on the left-hand side and a design challenge on the right-hand side, quite literally between a rock and a hard place, where in order to realize our full cross-section of the active transportation plan, it means removing this existing retaining wall and railing that you see there, building a new retaining wall to get the full width that we need for a 2-meter sidewalk, bike lane, and protected or buffered bike lane. So this is an example of where we can narrow the sidewalk to 1.5 meters, shift the center line of the road slightly so that we can still realize realize portion of our active transportation plan without getting the full width of the sidewalk. So that's a cost saving measure. And then further down, as you can see by the green in the drawing, this is an example where in order to match the new proposed elevation of the sidewalks, where significant fill would have to go into the properties to meet that grade. So this is where we would need retaining walls. And a better picture of this is the same area where a consideration can be put forward to instead perhaps keep this existing sidewalk, not need these additional retaining walls. And this is just again part of some design considerations that council or committee can consider in cost savings. I am going to go, oh yeah, so these are also some project metrics that we're here tonight presenting in an attempt to prioritize certain aspects of these projects. These metrics are here using the updated information from the 90% designs, and also something that committee can provide feedback or comment on in terms of the importance of these metrics, prioritization of the projects, or if there's additional metrics that could be considered. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Tyler. And I'm looking at the matrix here at some of the costs that have dramatically increased.
Yeah.
So don't go anywhere because I'm betting there's a handful of questions here. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Amanda, can I share you a small slideshow of some of my comments and stuff? I thought it'd be easier just like draw it on the paper rather than trying to explain it.
Go ahead and email.
Sure.
Tell you what, why don't you go ahead and email it to her and then we'll come back to you when she's ready to go that.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. So is this report something you are preparing for the first time, or is it one that you already do on a quarterly or monthly basis? The sort of projects that you're working on, cost deviances, et cetera, sort of from my own understanding.
Yeah, for sure. So we wanted to get back in the second slide there, council's input at that stage for when we're going to the next design.
Mhm.
Now that we're at this 90% design stage, and as the chair has spoken to additional cost measures, we want to come to council or committee first, and then to council to provide them these additional costs and get some feedback on prioritization of the projects. So it isn't an annual thing. It's more of a prompted by the additional progression of the design stage.
Okay. My question is just based on, I think something like this could be a standing agenda item for a active transportation network committee meeting, is that every quarter we get an update on the projects as they were planned and how they're sort of deviating to plan, either cost or timing. I think it was just perfect timing because I was at another organization and I bring information on what we learn at the active transportation meeting to that committee. That's Scenic Citizens Environmental Network, and call it. And so one of the asks was a regular update once a quarter on what are the new upcoming projects? What are we starting? What are we finishing? What are we continuing? So I think that's what this is. And I don't know whether I'll make a motion at a later time, but I think this could be a standing item, is to always get this information. Because my last comment will be, I think your projects, your 10 or so projects, I think they mapped to our planning, and I think they're all priority 1 projects. So again, just to sort of keep an eye on that is, I think, what can be our main objective as a committee here.
So you're right.
Okay.
A couple of things, Tyler, if you bear with me for a moment. So a lot of work was done by council this term and previous term to scale the projects as in a ranking, a hierarchy of, but also where we wanted to see the works done first, because obviously we can't do them all at the same time. So how they would unfold and where they would unfold. And just in a nutshell, a lot of the emphasis was placed upon location for schools, for instance, over here, leading down to Dunsmuir and stuff like that. So, and you'll notice the Hagel Drive leads right to, what is it, David Cameron? No,
Yes.
is it David Cameron over there? So that kind of weighed on the prioritization of those works. Now, your question about upcoming works, and Tyler, help me out for a sec. Do we not have we have a page on our webpage that shows all current projects that are being undertaken by the community?
in terms of these active.
Yeah, is that just the rezonings and stuff like that? Yeah, I gotcha.
Yeah.
You can get back to me on that.
Get back to
But that's a great point, Stephen, and we should be maybe hearing at this committee level sort of how these are unfolding and some of the planning stages. So now, what it is that we're looking for and engineering is looking for is our thoughts on these specific ones, which is why they're here tonight. So rather than the bigger picture, we want to get just a little bit more granular now. There's been some design work done on these ones and looking for specific feedback. Amanda, are you ready yet with, okay. Is that good? Yes. Good. Okay, perfect. And I'll come back to you, Colin, go ahead. I like visuals.
Okay, thank you, Amanda. I'll just let you know each time I want to go to the next slide. That works with you. Okay, excellent. I think there's a button that it should show, like on my screen, the top right has a slideshow button. Okay, thank you. Next slide, please. Sorry for the line. My mouse doesn't like to cooperate too often. So this is the first kind of question concern of mine. I noticed that quite often there was, I think it was like maybe hexagon number 11 was like protected concrete vertical paint kind of stuff. But here I did not notice it. Maybe it was forgotten, but here I do have a bit of a concern. Could you go to the next slide, please? So an example I found, spending too much time on Google Maps, but it was in Christchurch, New Zealand. In one of these corners, they took their buffer chunk and they just put plants, concrete, making so much divide to let vehicles know not to accidentally go over into where people are supposed to be. Because particularly with myself, I'm a chosen, it's a huge issue. The white fog line, people just unknowingly go over it unintentionally so often. And this is a huge safety consideration that needs to be taken into account of the corners need to be drastically improved for protection, particularly just barriers, plants, something. Upper dividers, they aren't as visual, so drivers still often forget them and knock them over like dominoes sometimes. Next slide, please.
Do you want me to provide comment as well?
Yes, please.
Okay, so can we go back to the first slide? So absolutely, and this is something that for sure we'll take going forward. This is a unique scenario where you can see the red property line there.
Yes.
But the biggest challenge for us is actually that green tree where it says arborist to review impact.
Yep.
So we've identified this area where the roots are a very limiting factor in this scenario. And that even that buffer is hard to achieve in this area without. And on the other side of the road, I should say as well, you have a culvert and no room to push the center line of the road. So this is unfortunately a spot where we did have to make some sacrifices, and the vertical cones don't take up the volume or the width that is the other measures, but for sure something that we're going to consider.
It doesn't necessarily have to be like the full 1 meter there, but at least like a small, like a few inch concrete divider to give a large visual barrier to do not cross kind of thing. Could you go next slide, please? And then the next one after. Okay, thank you. This was there's a lot of these ones where it's like these side road things for like small residential streets and whatnot. I noticed this one, it doesn't really have a zebra crosswalk or the yellow tactile. I keep pushing pronunciation, but like something like yellow tactile pads on each end, and then the zebra crosswalk here is missing, giving the like false idea this is a place for cars, not for people. And with this supposed to be like a stop sign, drivers often just do like a California roll right through there, particularly when it seems very inviting for them to do that, which is something that's a bit of a concern. Next slide, please. A new example in Vancouver Island is in Nanaimo, where they're doing like these continuous crosswalks that we see in a lot of places around the world that show tremendous benefits in safety improvements for pedestrians, cyclists. This one has a cyclist. Often their cyclists are forgotten about, unfortunately, on these ones, but the amount of cars that actually stop increases dramatically. I do have a link to one study on the future slide here. And then also amount of when they do hit a person is often a lot less serious and deadly, which overall improves a much more safety consideration. And even if it's not raised to keep the continuous sidewalk level, even just making it at ground level with a car, with all this different colors and materials, it really gives the idea to the car, this is not, they're a guest in this space instead of this being their territory, which also has many safety benefits to it. Next slide. There was one example I gave in a past presentation a few years ago. There's many more now that are getting more implemented around North America. But in one street in Cambridge, the pedestrian crashes with cars and pedestrians, 45% less. The amount of times a vehicle was yielding to a pedestrian went up over 5-fold. So these things do have serious, really good benefits. And I was also often told about the considerations of emergency response vehicles. That is a situation. So often a lot of places don't put them along interrupting main roads because those are supposed to be fast routes for response. But on these main offside routes where you're already having to stop, and when you're making a turn, when you're an emergency vehicle, you're already having to slow down a lot. And when these continuous crosswalks are made right, there is often no difference in time. So the argument, it doesn't always apply in some of these cases. Next slide. This is another example. This one's not raised, but it gives a huge amount of material difference to really show the car that this is a place for people and not themselves. And they haven't done a study just yet on this, but from what I've heard, there has been a lot of decrease in the amount of incidents in these new designs. Next slide, please. Here is another one where they just put both bike lanes on one side of the road. You can see it's a serious place. This is a place for people, bicycles, as I keep mentioning, but it's just another example of what could be done. Next slide. Crosswalks. I have a thing with when they avoid zebra crosswalks, particularly when they rip them out. Like by my school, we used to have a zebra crosswalk. They went out of their way to rip it out, which is rather interesting. But for example, crosswalks should have like pedestrian islands, the yellow tactile plates to help the visually impaired people. The conflict zones, when they do have to actually happen, it's really marked green, the elephant footprints, but mainly zebra crosswalks, really visible pedestrian islands. Next slide. This is a typical road design we have in Collet. I brought this up past ones, but it's something that gets brought up in a few of the roads, like Kelly. I know Fulton has really constraint issues, so it's not really doable. But on many other areas in Collet, this is a typical design. Next slide. What could be done is in some places they just move those two buffered bike gutters and they put them both together on one side and just put planters. It gives the gold standard bi-directional bike lane that has much more space, safety and convenience to people. And people often use these bi-directional ones compared to the single ones. So it's just a design consideration at times. Next slide. And then there's just some odd sources I threw in there for if you wanted to look at some stuff. Thank you, Amanda.
Thank you for that, Colin. And Amanda, if you could share that with Tyler, just so he can refer to it as needed, and lots of good meat on that discussion. My only concern would be, some of that is very idealistic in nature, and really some of these are very constrained locations as far as cross section goes. So really, it's difficult to come up with a gold standard for the entire community. When each road, each one of these we discussed, has its own challenges, as Fulton Road, for instance, there with the.
Yes, I was wondering like places like Kelly Road or Sweet Road, these things are much more.
So Tyler, you have that. So if you guys could chew on that or sauce that into your discussions, that would be great.
Thank you. Yeah,
I bring it
thank you
back
for
to
that.
committee. Stephen, David. Good. So I do have some thoughts, and I would like the committee's input on. I look, Tyler, at some of the costings here, and I noticed that specifically the Fulton Road, the challenges in Fulton Road. maybe you can discuss that. Well, I'll give you my questions. You know, some of the costs, it seems quite for what looks like, oh, on your matrix, you talked about homes that were impacted.
Yeah.
Can you explain what that is? Impact how?
Absolutely.
I'm assuming that's construction, is that?
It's more so the homes that will have the direct use of these sidewalks.
Okay.
For example, fronting. And then if I could draw attention to the ancillary impact. So this metric was taken from our transportation master plan. For school zones, when I identified catchment, it took a 250-meter radius of that property. And we transfer that over onto these sidewalk projects. So essentially it's the length of the sidewalk project and then a 250-meter bubble around it is where you get your number of homes indirectly impacted.
Okay, and can you explain sort of the, I mean, the 50% cost increase with the work that you guys done for, I mean, that goes beyond just materials and whatnot. Are there some challenges in that stretch?
That's a great question. So yeah, a portion of that, as you mentioned, is the increase in construction costs, but the significant number, which was a 1.7 million jump, was the rock breaking for a storm pipe. So we have a failing storm pipe on Fulton. We still need a CCTV the entire length to discover the extent of it. But in order to remove this and have the storm, it's also tied into our stormwater master plan. It's a project that's identified in our stormwater master plan that's being bumped up to be included in this sidewalk project. The last thing we want is to do the sidewalk project and then 5 years later, this project comes up in the master plan and shoot, now we have to rip up our brand new sidewalks to put this in. So that was that addition, and it's a significant cost for the rock breaking for that pipe.
And yes, I'd prefer not to do it and then tear it up again. That would defeat the purpose, I guess. But I mean, I can't tell because these are small cross sections, but can you speak to that lower Fulton area? Because obviously it's the last, say, quarter of the road or eighth of the road at the bottom that has no sidewalk whatsoever, but there's a long existing stretch there. Can you speak to how that would unfold as far as from Souk Road going up?
Like realizing the sidewalk on the west side, I guess.
Yeah.
And are you asking in terms of the costs associated with
Well,
that?
yeah, I'm trying to extrapolate here. The costs seem huge, but there's already an extensive section that has a sidewalk. So
yeah,
what is it that's costing us the $6 million or?
Yeah, definitely a significant portion of that is the storm main that we'll be putting underneath the sidewalk, and in the drawings it identifies essentially where it ties in at Beck's Hill Road, brand new sidewalks going from the top all the way down, tying into Souk, and removing that existing sidewalk and implementing our full cross section.
I just wonder, I feel like there's some more work that we can put into Fulton Road there, or some more discussion, especially if we're connecting this stormwater. I mean, it's not our job, it's not this committee's job, I guess, to speak to the stormwater remediation, but I mean, you are looking for some direction from us, and I see that the other three projects certainly are within the scope of what council, I think, identified for engineering as far as our ratings. And I just wonder if we should take a deep breath with the Fulton Road project and at least wonder or at least process, are we getting the best bang for our buck? I mean, I am not an avid cyclist, unlike other people on this committee, but to me, that Fulton Road Hill certainly would be an inhibitor for mass cycling use. So I feel like the other projects, which certainly are on much more level ground, we probably get more bang for our buck. I welcome some input from the committee, though. Those are just my thoughts. Dave.
Thanks, Dean. Yeah, I'd have to agree. There'd definitely be more people walking and cycling on Triangle Mountain. Yeah. So if we can reduce the size of that right of way to save some costs, maybe they could be better used on other areas.
Okay, thank you. And
For me, the Fruiton Road is kind of like almost like a bit of a trolley problem. Like there's the other areas that have that when the infrastructure is put in, there could be much more greater use of it compared to a place that doesn't have as many people, especially with future development with the BC government whacking on some municipalities. It kind of makes sense to put the infrastructure in areas that are going to have a lot of development compared to places that really it'd be difficult to develop there, let alone the smaller populations. So maybe almost like I don't like not to like defer the project, but like focus more on like the core areas, like Kelly Road connecting the two like Galloping Goose ones, Machosen Road along near schools would be more of a priority compared to kind of off in the mountains where cycling is a bit of a difficulty, but at the same time there needs to be some safety stuff there because on those corners the cyclist does dare to go in there. They can get hit, which is at the same time bit of the trolley kind of dilemma on that.
gotcha. So certainly Fulton Road is on our hit parade, so it is well recognized as something. But from what I see here, I'd certainly like to see us focus on those three other projects and maybe circle back on Fulton. Is this the kind of direction that engineering is looking for, Tyler? Or?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay.
And for sure to take a critical look at the costing for Fulton and see what measures can be implemented if this is going to proceed or absolutely.
So would you like a motion? Well, let's, I'll tell you what, I'll craft something. There isn't one here, is there? There's nothing, you're not looking for any specific direction from us?
General discussion is great. And if you wanted to make a motion to elaborate on the Fulton Road recommendation. Yeah.
I think we will. How about, and I'm not sure if Mr. Rosenberg at all wants to weigh in and have some thoughts or make sure that we're not going too far afield.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, our intent tonight was to update the committee on the projects, but as well just talk about the fact that Fulton Road, for what we think we can achieve from a mode shift point of view, you're spending a lot of money to get virtually almost no mode shift. So we wanted to bring that piece of information to see if the committee was thinking that perhaps, something like $6 million, when you look at the cost of some of those other projects or the recently done Ben Homer and Owens, you could do 2 or 3 projects like that for the same cost of Fulton and actually make a difference around schools or in the protection of areas or buffering or changing those cross sections. So the intent was just to see if the committee was thinking along those lines, and that was the purpose of the matrix. Obviously, this committee can't make those decisions, but certainly they have the influence in those council discussions. And the next step would be for us to bring this back to council. And at that time, they'd probably see whatever recommendation you thought was worthwhile and make that part of that consideration moving forward.
Thank you. Maybe you can suggest some wording that would work for you. I mean, in my mind, those other 3 projects make all the sense in the world. And then some reflection on
I think at the end of the day, staff is just looking for direction from council on whether they'd like to proceed with the significant spending on Fulton, or perhaps delay that project to see if some of the other projects moving forward might be more beneficial at this time with regards to costs.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And I think I will put forward a motion to in that regard that we delay the Fulton Road works with Amanda, help me out, that we delay the Fulton Road works due to costings.
I would say just to define future project scopes and see if you might have better benefits somewhere else, or maybe have a look at the benefits that might be achieved for altering the project schedule. We'll have the design, it'll be in place. We might want to just pivot, say in 2025, and do different projects instead, or at least have another look at it sometime in the future.
So it's certainly not pulling Fulton off the list. It's just
deferring it, I guess, might be a better term.
Amanda, sorry, did you get something out of all that?
That the Fulton Road works be deferred. Do you want to say a certain year or?
Just deferred
Deferred?
for further
Further consideration.
consideration, given the increased costings.
Okay, so that Fulton Road works be deferred for further consideration due to increased costing?
Due to the increases in costings, yeah.
Okay.
Something like that, that works. And thank you, Mr. Rosenberg. And discussion, any discussion from committee? Thank you. Anyone opposed to that amendment? Perfect, thank you. And the other projects certainly look great. I think that one just caught my attention for the price increase and the value. Thank you so much, Tyler.
Thank you.
And I don't see anything else on our agenda. Anything arising? Go ahead.
I was just wondering, I know it's getting late and whatnot, but maybe if we could make another additional recommendation motion.
Go ahead. What are you thinking?
I'm thinking for areas that where we do have two buffered bike lanes on like the flatter areas where space allows, to instead of putting them on each side of the road, to put them together on one side and then have a divider to get that kind of gold standard. And then I guess example that would be on slide 11 of the things to consider. Any discussion ideas on that?
So let's be concise. How about something along the lines of where possible that the side by side, sorry, what were the words you used?
Instead of having like the two buffered bike lanes on each side of the road, to have them combined on one side of the road with a barrier.
Consider, I would, sorry, first off, I'd love some feedback from engineering, Mr. Rosenberg. Because I understand cross sections differ from street to street to street. So
Yes.
it's hard to come up with a standard, but if we're providing some guidance that these are things that we would like them to explore.
Yes.
Then I would love some feedback on that aspect.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah. We can do anything with money. I'd be quite hesitant to be asked to just start doing bi-directional paths everywhere, because the consequence isn't just on the street that it's on. It's the connection to all those streets where it would occur. And typically, I mean, our current active transportation plan has the ability to put those in there. Those are going to occur on your collectors and your arterials, which are going to have many streets that cross them. So there could be some significant cost consequences, which again, if we're not worried about taxes or funding, then by all means, we could do it everywhere. I'd be more probably keen for some kind of direction that says, much like our Bakker sidewalks with property line, which is a great idea to take full advantage of our cross section, but there's times when the value that you get for what it costs you to put in $500,000 for the retaining walls, where you could move that sidewalk a meter in and narrow that boulevard, you gain so much more value on the next project. With the bi-directional bikeways, I think it's the same kind of thing. So the idea that, where possible and where the, and not put the cost factor to it, but allow staff to use that lens of where possible. Let's look at bi-directional lanes in our arterials and collectors, which would be appropriate according to the active transportation plan, and then just leave it at that. And then what we can do, much like the sidewalks, is come back and comment on why we haven't done it, as opposed to why we are doing it. And in some cases, it might make sense for us to bring forward, because there is not an exponential cost factor, but a reasonable cost factor to provide that, because it is a great treatment to have where it's appropriate and, it's cost effective. So we've always got to look at that bottom line dollar wise in some cases, but in other cases for a small cost increase, relatively speaking, it does make sense to take a look at that. So I would just suggest that we advise staff or council to suggest that we look at that as an alternative when we're designing these treatments.
Okay. Mr. Chair, if I could also add to Mr. Rosenberg's comments, as was noted, this motion would be in line with the active transportation network plan. In fact, protected bike lanes on page 37 of the draft, second draft of the active transportation network plan shows the bi-directional protected bike lane as the preferred option. So suffice to say, this is already in.
Thank you. So it does sound like this has been contemplated. Colin, does that work?
If it's in that draft, then yes. What about, is in the draft those continuous crosswalks on certain streets?
Through the chair, no, and I've got a note here to look at that. Thank you.
So if you're good, they've taken it under advisement and are aware of your ideas.
Do you need like an extra fancier stamp to that?
Through the chair, no, I think, we still have a draft active transportation network plan. Right now, we're looking at the feedback from our IACTI committee. And we'll be preparing a report to come back with potential improvements from that feedback, and certainly good ideas are something that staff will take and run with, and so look for that in the next draft.
So I think the right time period for that discussion will be when that plan comes forward.
Do you have a rough time frame of when that could be on our plates?
No, I don't. Just working with our other committee partners at this time.
Okay, well, thank you. That's all for me
It's
then.
slithering its way through the process.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you so much. And looking for a motion to adjourn. Thank you, David. Anyone opposed? Seeing none. Thank you so much. Thank you, Amanda.